Today's video is going to be on my opinion of the top 10 teams in South African CSGO, with the keywords being my opinion. It's quite a challenging video to make considering how closely contested the middle ground is in South African CSGO right now, because on any given day, Team X will beat Team Y, and then the next day, Team Y will beat Team X in a different competition. So the middle ground is constantly back and forth in South African CSGO right now, making it very turbulent and very tough to get an accurate idea of what the real ranking is in South African CSGO. Because keep in mind, rankings are based off of past results, not off of potential, and you can't factor in qualitative characteristics and factors because you can't actually quantify them. So with that in mind, this ranking is going to be based off of these top 10 teams' results in the past 3 months, not off of what they're capable of doing, which is a really key thing to distinguish between. Rankings are based on past results, not potential ability, okay? So, I think that rankings are actually really healthy for scenes, not because they should be the be-all and end-all and everybody follow them religiously, but just because it gives a bit of an insight into the scene, it gives a bit of structure, and for people who don't follow every single event super closely, they can still have an idea of how things are going, who's at the top, who's making their way up through the scene, and it just gives a bit of a reference point, something that you can look back on and see how things have changed over the past few months. So if this video gets well received, it's something that I'll try to do like every 3 to 4 months, based off of the previous events and competitions and leagues that have been happening. So, with that in mind, let's have a look at the events that we're going to be considering when deciphering this ranking and coming up with a bit of a picture at the end of this. So, the first event is going to be the ESEA League Season 34. That culminated with the end of July. The playoffs finished at the end of July, and that is the first event we're going to be looking back, and the oldest event that we're going to be considering. You'll see on your screen right now, I don't have the Telkom VS Gaming Masters Season 5 Leg 3 a part of my considerations. Now, Leg 3 ended also towards the end of July, but the reason that I didn't factor the Leg 3 results in is because we're looking at the Telkom VS Gaming Master Season 5 Comic-Con results, or just the main event in general. So I decided I'm not going to do Leg 3 and the main event. I'm only going to be considering the main event placements. Anyway, back to checking these events we're considering. Predator Winter Slam, which happened in early August. That was 8 teams that participated, and then we went to the Gamedock Cup thereafter, also an 8-team event. The Rogue Soldiers of Fortune, it was the Rogue Soldiers of Fortune came after that. That was an 8-team event as well. Then we had the main event of the Telkom VS Gaming Masters Season 5. That was an 18-team event, and it was just based off of who made it through Leg 3 in the Premier Division, a couple teams from First Div as well, and then another qualifier made up the 18 teams there. And then we had the Umzansi Esports League as well, which happened the most recently out of all these events, and had a solid prize pool as well, and was also a league that had been running for a while, which finished with the playoffs just the other week. So those are our 6 events. Now, out of those 6 events, it's quite evident that 3 of them were surmountably larger than the other 3. The Rogue Soldiers of Fortune, the Telkom VS Gaming Master Season 5 main event, and the Umzansi Esports League were all pretty much in that in excess of 150,000 Rand plus, besides Umzansi Esports League, just under, but regardless, it's all 3 of these events are kind of in the same bracket. Now, of course, the Telkom VS Gaming Masters Season 5 is a slightly larger event, but it's still, in my considerations, in the same bracket as the Rogue Soldiers of Fortune and the Umzansi Esports League, because the prize pools are fairly similar. When deriving rankings, the 2 things that you consider for the events that you analyze are what the prize pool was and what the teams were that were competing at the event. That's what makes up how much stock you give that event, right? That's what generates what tier event you're considering right now. It is the prize pool and how stacked the event is with teams. Now, all 8 of these events had the best teams in South Africa competing, which means that it's a common denominator throughout, i.e., it's not something we have to consider. So I have just looked at the prize pool when considered how large each of these events are. That is what I've based my decision off of how large it is just directly how big the prize pool is, because all of them were stacked with very good teams, with the top teams in South African CSGO. So that means that we don't have to change our decisions on these events based on what teams were competing. So with that in mind, we can now look at the 10th team in my ranking. And that 10th team is Umzansi Esports. Now, this was an incredibly closely contested decision between Umzansi and Nibble Conspire for me. Both of these teams were very close. And you could make a case for both in this position in the ranking. Now, let me explain why I went with Umzansi over Nibble. When you look at both of these teams' placements in the two events they both competed in, Umzansi placed higher than Nibble in both of the events. The two events they both took part in were ESEA League Season 34 and the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5 main event. Now, in the ESEA League, Umzansi placed 10th and Nibble placed 13th. Okay, so Umzansi edged them out there. And then at the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5, Umzansi placed 9th to 13th, and Nibble had placed 13th to 16th. So again, Umzansi placed one higher. Not only that, but Umzansi had actually beaten Nibble Conspire in their championship elimination match, which pretty much determined who progressed to the next stage and who was eliminated altogether. So that was a big win for Umzansi, and they beat Nibble in that all-important match, which gave them slightly more stock in my opinion. You'll see a bunch of DNCs on your screen right now. A DNC means did not compete, which means Umzansi only took part in 2 out of these 6 events. And that's why it's also pretty tough to get an accurate ranking on these teams, especially like the lower teams that didn't compete in all the events. You can't get a full picture of their genuine ranking, so to be. And like I said, I didn't take into account Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5 Leg 3, which is where Nibble Conspire placed 4th, right? So if you took that into account, all of a sudden it paints a different picture. In this video, in this ranking, I did not consider the Leg 3. So that is why it played no part in my decision making. And I'm just making that clear for people who are watching, that you can change your criteria. And as soon as you change your criteria, it creates a different complexion and you're going to be getting different results. So with this criteria in mind, Umzansi Esports takes 10th spot. Nibble gets a shout out, definitely right up there as well. Moving across into the 9th best team in South Africa right now, in my opinion, is XD Gaming. Okay, they also only took part in 2 out of the 6 events over the past 3 months, and that was the ROG Soldiers of Fortune and the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5 main event. So they placed dead last in the ROG Soldiers of Fortune, which was unfortunate for them, meaning they walked away with no prize money, but they still had, it's XD. It's that team that's the dark horse and who are capable of pitching up and taking a map off of one of the top teams, or winning a few upset games and making a bit of a run in the competition. Yeah, it didn't really happen in the ROG Soldiers of Fortune, but it certainly did happen in the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5. They were able to go all the way through to that 7th, 8th position, not far off of even reaching Comic-Con altogether. So it was an impressive run from XD, all things considered. They managed to get themselves into that 7th, 8th position for Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5, and they beat some solid opposition along the way. They ended up losing out to Online Kingdom 2-1, which is no mean feat. They did beat Umzansi, and they lost to ATK in the winner bracket, but regardless, still a solid showing from XD, in particular in the group stage. So they come in 9th here. They did have a bit of turmoil with their roster. It was consistent, but when I say turmoil, there was just changing of a couple players back and forth. So they didn't really have as much consistency as they would have liked. But in the end, XD, they come in 9th in my ranking. So going into 8th, I have got White Rabbit Gaming. Now, they actually had a fairly consistent season, all things considered. They did change out Schneeks for Tuckbok fairly recently, but for the most part, they've had the same look. They've had the same image. They've been led by Zio. He's had custom at his side once again. It's been the reunion of South Africa's most loved couple, and they had a consistent showing throughout the past 3 months with some decent placements at pretty much all of the events they placed in. They never really bombed out at anything that they competed in. They placed 6th in the ESEA League, which was actually their best result. They finished joint last in the Predator Winter Slam and in the Gamedock Cup, but that's not really anything too negative, because those events were so stacked with 8 very good teams, and they had to reach those events through the qualifiers where they had to beat out other up-and-coming teams. So the fact that they were there in the first place already speaks volumes, right? They didn't take part in the Rogue Soldiers of Fortune. They just did not compete whatsoever. They weren't a part of the qualifier. So that's just, we couldn't consider that at all. It's not like they bombed out in the qualifier. And then they had probably a bit of a poorer run in the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5 than what they would have liked, finishing 9th, 13th. They ended up losing out to Royalty 2-1, which is no mean feat, right? We've all seen what Royalty are capable of over the past few months when they're at their best. They're capable of going toe-to-toe with the best in the country. And that was actually quite a close game, besides the last map, which ended up 16-2 for Royalty. So that's where WRG's run came to an end in the Telkom vs Gaming Masters, and then they placed 8th in the Umzansi Esports League, which was also last. But the point is that it doesn't mean that they didn't do well, because they had to reach that event in the first place. They had to qualify for that event. So it still holds weight and speaks volumes as to what they were capable of. Reaching the main event is still an impressive feat. So I have them in 8th spot. Going into 7th, I have got Online Kingdom in my 7th position. Now, Online Kingdom could be actually one of the most up-and-coming teams in South African CSGO right now. They've also had to make a roster change or two. Chappie has come into the team, and he's taken over the reins as IGL, and it actually immediately had an upturn with this team's results. It sort of like took them to the next level, in my opinion. They were always there on thereabouts, and when they were performing at their best, they were able to produce some impressive results and take a map of some better teams here or there, but they weren't consistently performing at that level we knew they were capable of. Now with Chappie in the team and everybody starting to find their footing, this Online Kingdom is a force to be reckoned with, actually. And like I said, certainly one of the dark horses in South African CS, and not really going to be a dark horse for much longer, because people have found them out and they know that they are capable of doing damage, so they're starting to be respected by the better teams, and therefore it's going to be more challenging for Online Kingdom, because they're not going to be getting any free maps because teams take them too lightly. But they know what they're capable of. They've got the firepower. They've got some nice structure. The one thing I will say is that their map pool needs a bit of work, I think. Like in Mirage, they're just so damn good on. But outside of that, it's a little bit iffy. They've got some strengths, but they can definitely build on them. And I think this Online Kingdom team is certainly one to keep an eye on going forward. So I have them in 7th. You can see their results were pretty consistent across the board. Constantly, placing in the top 7. Never lost in any of the events they took part in. Their most impressive result for me was that 6th place in the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5. They were so close to reaching that final stage, the top 4. They lost their last game, which would have solidified themselves a spot in that top 4. And that was against DNMK. So, super unfortunate for Online Kingdom. It got really, really close for them. They had a really good run, beating the likes of XD, OG, and some good results in the group stage as well. So yeah, solid stuff from the boys in Online Kingdom, and definitely a team I'm going to be watching closely going forward. Now, we go into the 6th spot. In 6th, I have got Royalty Esports, and they are also one of the super up-and-coming teams in South African CSGO right now. It's pretty much them and Online Kingdom that are the two teams who are, sort of charging into that upper echelon, that tier 1 South African teams. They're showing that they're capable of going up against Goliath, going up against Energy. Yeah, ATK is probably another conversation right now, but that's for everybody in South African CSGO. So it's just good to see that there are these teams like Royalty and Online Kingdom that have that potential, right? So I've got Royalty in 6th. Now, they also had solid showings in the events that they competed in and showed consistently that they have what it takes to compete with the best in South Africa. In ESEA, they came 5th, same as in the Predator Winter Slam. Gamedock Cup, they were a little bit less successful, but their most impressive result was at the ROG Soldiers of Fortune, where they managed to get that 3rd placement and actually take home some decent prize money as well. But in the process, their most impressive result was that game against Energy that they won 2-0. It was a 2-0 victory. It was a 16-1 win on Nuke. And then they went and played on Inferno, which was Energy's pick. And they won that, I think, 19-17 or 19-16 in overtime. And that was a super legit performance from Royalty in the best of 3. They then went up against Goliath Gaming. And unfortunately for them, they weren't able to emulate the same result. However, it wasn't like they got blown out of the water by Goliath. They still had a solid showing in that match, and they were in positions to even potentially win a map here or win a map there. I remember they were ahead on Nuke at one stage, and even on Inferno, they were making Goliath work hard as well. And, Goliath was super well known for being like the best team in South Africa on Inferno. So, yeah. That's Royalty's run. They had some good results, in particular, like I said, the ROG Soldiers of Fortune, and they consistently showed that they have what it takes to be competitive with the best in the country. So, moving from 6th into 5th, I have got DNMK Esports. Now, this is certainly something that you could debate, because it all comes down to how much weight you give each of the events. Like I said, it's pretty much the size of the prize pool that determines how much weight we give each event, and the fact that DNMK came 2nd in the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5 would probably be enough for some people to put them in the 4th position. But I decided that I'm going to be having them in 5th. Now, let me explain to you why. Okay, even though they had that amazing result at the Telkom vs Gaming Masters Season 5, where they placed 2nd at Comic-Con, they went all the way to the final. It was a fantastic run. They were outplaced by the team who I have in 4th in every other event. Okay. Yes, I know that we're giving more value and more weight to the bigger events, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not like because they placed higher in one event, which was the biggest event, they are now going to be placed in the ranking higher than the other team because they placed higher in one event. If they had placed higher in one of the other events, for example, I would have been compelled to have them in 4th. But because they were outplaced in every other event, I decided to have them in 5th. This DNMK team also made roster changes, lest we forget. They replaced Chappie and Dweezil, or Chappie and Lately rather, with Dweezil and Divo. So they also had to reassess the situation and figure themselves out once again. And the past 3 months have been challenging for them. And this Telkom vs Gaming Master Season 5 was one of their most recent results. Point being that they've started to find their footing, and you can see the results are coming through with that as well. Maybe 3 months down the line from now, we'll be having a different conversation and seeing them further up the ranking because they would have had more time and they would have more cohesiveness amongst them. So, yeah, you could make a debate either way. I'd love to hear what you guys think, whether you agree with me or whether you think the 2nd placing at the Telkom vs Gaming Master Season 5 was enough to have DNMK bumped into 4th. But just keep in mind their other placements as we switch across to 4th. They had 7th at the ROG Soldiers of Fortune, 5th at the other 3 events that they took part in as well. Okay, but that silver medal, that's a big one for them. That's a very big placement. Now we go into the 4th best team in South Africa based on my opinion, and I have the number completely wrong, which is incredibly irritating. So we're just going to readjust that right now on stream, and there we go. I have got Sinister 5 as my 4th best team in South African CSGO right now, based on the past 3 months. Looking at their numbers, as I said, they outplaced Dynamic in every single event that they took part in, besides from Comic-Con. They placed 4th in ESEA. They got the bronze medal at Predator Winter Slam. They placed 4th at Gamedock. They placed 4th at Telkom vs Gaming Masters. They placed 3rd at the Umzansi Esports League. Those 5 results, they placed in the top 4 in the event. It's really impressive from them that they consistently were placing in the top 4. When you consider the likes of ATK, Goliath, and Energy, we're pretty much always placing top 3. It's not like top 4 was a guarantee for Sinister 5. They had to grind their way and fight for that position. So it wasn't handed to them. and it's solid. It was a solid run from them that they were so consistent in all these events. Props to Sinister Five, who also made changes. They replaced Dweezil and Freaky slash Rogue. They had this weird. They didn't have a permanent fifth, as far as I remember. They just kept changing amongst them. They brought Slayer and lately in. They brought some balance into the roster, and it's just looked a lot better since then. So that's why I have Sinister 5 in fourth. They had a really good showing at the Umzansi Esports League, which is one of our big events. One of the 3 big events. They got a bronze medal. So that bumps them up nicely. And then they also got the bronze medal at the Predator Winter Slam. So I decided to go with Sinister 5 in fourth and DNMK in fifth. I'd love to know what you guys thought, like I said. Whether you agree with me or whether you think that second placing at Comic-Con Africa was enough for DNMK to go ahead of Sinister 5. Let me know. Okay, so moving into third now, it starts to get a bit more obvious from here what the rankings are going to be looking like going forward. We have got Energy Esports in third position. So medals across the board, a number of medals as well. They've got the bronzes in the 3 smaller events that they took part in, and keep in mind that those 3 events were also slightly earlier in this ranking consideration. You know, they were in sort of end of July, beginning of August type of thing. And that's when Energy were sort of starting to look their best. So you can see they got 3 consecutive bronze medals, only coming second to ATK and Goliath in those events. And then they started to depreciate a little bit, and they started to look a little bit less convincing as time was going. It's almost like they had peaked, and they weren't able to break through that peak and continue to develop. Their development started to stagnate, and they placed fourth at the Rock Soldiers of Fortune. I think the first indication was that match against Royalty. They lost 16-1 on Nuke, which is a map they're very well renowned on, and then they lost on Inferno in overtime. So that was like the first match that they would have been bitterly disappointed with. And then coming into Comic-Con, in the main event, or in the second stage of the main event rather, they weren't even able to qualify for the third stage. And, you know, Energy is the defending organization of Comic-Con Africa. They won in both 2018 and 2019, and they didn't even have a chance to defend their title. So that was unfortunate for them. Ended up placing fifth when they were certainly touted as one of the teams to reach that final stage. They ended up losing out to Sinister 5. And that was a bit of a problem because, as I said, they would have expected to reach the main event. Other people would have expected them to reach the main event, and they didn't. So now we shift into the Umzansi Esports League, where they actually had made the announcement before they took part in the playoffs that they were going to be changing their roster. They announced that both Lichlord and Tianki would be shifting from the active playing 5 to the bench, and they would be bringing 2 new players in. It's no secret who those 2 new players are because they've already been competing in ESEA, so I'm going to go ahead and just say their names. They're adding Wipeout and Flexi to the team, so those are the 2 players who are going to be replacing Lichlord and Tianki, and I think it's safe to say it's quite obvious that their firepower is going to be increasing, and I think that's a good thing, just adding a bit more balance to this team, and I'm keen to see how things progress for the roster in the months to come. So, based off the past 3 months though, with this team, I have Energy placed in third. They were just consistently the third best team in South Africa, and the bronze medal speaks volumes to that. They did get that silverware though in the Umzansi Esports League, where they came second, and I think that was a nice little final result for this team, just to end things off on a positive note. So now we come into the second best team in South Africa. No points for guessing who that is. It is Goliath Gaming. They have got 4 silver medals and 2 bronze medals. And unfortunately for them, they weren't able to crack the code. They weren't able to find a way to get across the line against ATK. Consistently coming second would have been heartbreaking for them. They tried everything they could to try and get across the line. And after 4 consecutive second placements, they finally ended up, starting to get a bit frustrated. And didn't even reach the finals in the last 2 events that they took part in. They lost out to DNMK in the Telkom VS Gaming Master Season 5 in that lower bracket final, which means they ended up placing third, and that was a 2-1 loss, right? Where they had won the first map, and then they ended up losing the second map, Vertigo, and the third map, Dust 2. And they lost that third map emphatically. It was a 16-5 scoreline for DNMK. And they just completely blew Goliath Gaming out of the water. So that was a bronze medal for Goliath. And then coming into the Umzansi Esports League, Goliath suffered another shock loss. They lost to a broken Energy Esports roster in that was either the semi-final or the lower bracket final, however you look at it. They ended up losing out and not reaching the final. I mean, and so unfortunate because coming into Comic-Con, it's when people were saying, finally, we've seen Goliath Gaming getting closer and closer. Is this going to be the moment where they finally are able to break the curse and beat ATK? And then they don't even get to the final to have a chance of doing that. So super unfortunate. They placed third there. They lose to Energy in the Umzansi Esports League as well. And that would have been, like I said, the biggest loss for them, considering that Energy had already announced they were changing their team. So that means they probably would have expected an easier game. However, you can't really you can't underestimate a wounded buffalo, right? Energy would have just been playing with that freedom, knowing they have nothing to lose. Everybody would have been just looking to have fun, and sometimes that's when you really start to play your best. So you don't want to take too much away from Energy, and Goliath, unfortunately for them, didn't have another shot at ATK in a final. So that's 2 bronze medals to finish off their run here in this 3-month period that I'm considering. And now we go into the best team in South African CSGO, undisputed, undoubtedly ATK Arena, gold medals across the board, and they just were so dominant throughout this past couple of months, winning every single event that they took part in, and not just like getting across the line winning, absolutely dominating the opposition winning. They were just so far ahead of everybody else that it wasn't even a consideration going into the event as to who might be winning this one. It's more like who's going to be coming second was more of a conversation. So yeah, like I said, they won every event they took part in. They got off really good with that ESEA win and the Predator Winter Slam and Gamedock Cup, just to start to set the tone, and everybody started to realize after those 3 events that this ATK team, they meant business, and they were capable of just going crazy, and really just head and shoulders above everybody else in the South African scene. And then they came into the 3 big events, and there were whispers like, can they do it when it matters the most? Can they win these matches and these finals when there's a lot more pressure on their shoulders and when there's more prize money on the line? Do they have the BMT? And they proved absolutely once again, yes they do. They won all 3 of the big events that we've had in the past few months as well, and they were convincing victories as well. In the Telkom VS Gaming Masters Season 5, in the main event, across all 3 stages, they did not drop one map. They played 25 maps, which include all 7 maps in the map rotation. And they won all 25 of those. They went 25-0. It speaks volumes to how incredibly dominant this ATK team is. Like, you could actually argue that this might be the most dominant we've seen a South African team. Of course, there was that bravado team through like 2015, 2016, who were also just so very dominant. And I'll have to go back and look at how many consecutive events they won and how close those games actually were, you know, whether they were pushed to the limit or whether it was also just, you know, very quick 2-0s. But this ATK team has just been a monolith, and nobody's been able to find the code to get across the line against them. And of course, the you know, everybody's saying they're going to be going to America, so good for them to, you know, dominate the local scene before heading abroad, because that's going to be giving them the confidence that they need to be like, yeah, we're the best and we deserve to be here right now. We have worked our way to earn this, and they deserve the shot. You know, they don't have the competition in South Africa. They're ready to go overseas, and I'm really keen to see how they're going to be matching up against international teams. So there you have it. That is the completion of my top 10 ranking, and now we can get a summary and have a look at all the teams in one quick image here. And just as I go through it, from the top down, ATK first, Goliath second, Energy third, Sinister 5 fourth, DNMK fifth, Royalty sixth, Online Kingdom 7th, White Rabbit Gaming 8th, XD Gaming 9th, and Ekasi Esports in 10th. That is my full final ranking based off of the past 3 months of events. Like I said, it's all about the criteria that you choose to make your decisions. I've gone ahead with selecting these 6 events and considering their placement across these events, not based on their potential, what they can do, but based on their hard results. Guys, I'm really keen to hear what you think about the rankings, how you see how you see the ranking in the South African scene right now. Do you agree with my reasoning? Do you disagree with my reasoning? Tell me why. What do you think I could have done differently? Because this is for the scene and the community, right? Is trying to come up with these rankings. I'm not trying to act like I'm the person who knows everything, and I've got the knowledge to completely set in stone exactly what the ranking should be. It's a very personalized thing, and I'd love to know if you guys think that there should be other factors considered when making these rankings. Let me know what you guys think. I hope you enjoyed, and have a good day.